Hi, I'm Chuck Dorsett for Weaver Leather Craft Supply. With me, Loni Menuez, co-worker and fellow leather crafter, and she has got a gorgeous project. Loni, what are we working on?
Well, today we're working on this gorgeous fringe purse. I love this purse. I have it myself. This is what I carry every single day. We are going to make this out of our pebble grain 5 to 6 ounce leather. And it's heavy enough, but it's supple enough that when you make the fringe, it just hangs and drapes just absolutely beautifully. I just love this.
Love it too. My wife's got one and she almost won't let go of it. All right, with this, we're going to work with an 8 by 8 inch pouch size. More than enough for, say, a checkbook, some car keys, and a cell phone. But other than that, sky's the limit on dimensions with this great bag. So, first step, where are we going to start?
Well, Chuck, we're going to start with our pattern, as always.
Nice.
This plastic sheeting is what we're going to be using to make our pattern today. This can also be used as a bag stiffener. This is a relatively new product for Weaver Leather, but I love the weight of it and just how it feels and how it works, and so we're going to be using this to create our pattern today. So our first step is going to be to make the pattern for our main body here. And the measurements that we're going to need are 8 inches by 34 inches. And the 34 inches is necessary to take into account these 10 inches on either side for our fringe. So at this point, we're going to go ahead and mark and cut our main panel. And there's our last cut for our 8 by 34 inch piece. Now what we're going to do for this gorgeous 10-inch fringe is I'm going to take my square, I'm going to move it down, and I'm going to mark off our 10 inches. There's our 10 on that side. Come down here and I'm going to measure 10 inches in from our end and mark again. And to avoid confusion later, I'm going to be very sure to mark down where my fringe is at so that we don't make a mistake while we're cutting. Okay, and now Chuck is going to cut the front pouch panel and the gusset.
Now, for the front pouch panel, we're going to have rounded corners on the bottom of this. But for right now, let's start with just a simple 8 inch by 8 inch piece. And our last cut. Now, we've got our 8 by 8, but on our pouch, we've got round corners. Very nice touch. Easily done. In fact, on this, we'll be using tape very shortly to mark our cut line for our fringe, but I'm simply going to drop in my tape, and on 2 of my corners, I'm just going to draw in a round corner. Easily done, very clean. Now I'm going to take my knife and cut these. And nice clean round corners. Now again, these do not have to be spot on perfect because part of the look of this bag is rustic. Now, we need to mark for our holes. We're going to mark our holes on our main front panel, and then we're going to mark our gusset and our main body from this so everything matches up. So what I want to do is I'm going to come in 3/8 of an inch, and I'm simply going to make a mark starting 1/2 inch from the top. I'm going to make a mark at every 1/2 inch, and going around my corners. Again, we do not have to be spot on perfect, but we do want to try to keep this at least as close as we can, so as we move around the pouch, our holes don't begin to spread out. So I'm going to mark this again, 3/8 of an inch in from the edge, and 1/2 inch increments. And our last few holes. Now we can use this to mark the main body, and our lace holes will match up perfectly. Now, one thing we need though is our gusset. Now the gusset is this portion of the bag. We're going to cut this at 2 inches, but we could certainly go 3 or 4. The only thing we need to be cautious of is we don't make those gussets so wide that our fringe comes out up here and we don't have room on the face of the bag for our closure. So, 2 inches wide. Now we're going to need 8, 16, 24, but I'm going to cut that a little extra length there. I'm going to put a little extra length on that. So let's do a 2 by 26 inch piece for our gusset. And my last cut, easy enough. Now, great thing here, 2 inches wide. So I simply can lay that on the edge of my leather, butt that across the edge, cut on the other side and have a perfect 2-inch gusset. Now, another easy step. We're going to drop in our lace holes just like we did on the front of the pouch. But here's the great thing. I'm just going to count the number of holes that I have marked here. Comes up to 42. So I'm going to take my gusset, drop in my square, and I'm going to pull in 3/8 of an inch from the edge, just like we did here. And I'm going to mark, starting with a 1/2 of an inch from the top, 1/2 inch increment between each hole, and I'm going to do that on both sides, and I'm going to lay in 42 holes. That way, when we go to lay in our gusset to our body, it's going to be a perfect match. And our last mark, nice. Now we have our gusset, 42 holes to match the pouch face, 3/8 of an inch in, and 1/2 inch increments. Now let's go ahead and punch the holes in these. First off, so we can lay the pouch in on top of our main body, mark our punch holes, and then all 3 pieces will sync up perfectly. And our last hole, now I'm going to pass that to Loni for our next step.
So we're going to go ahead and mark and punch holes for our pouch face piece. What we want to do is take and lay this right up against one of the fringe lines. Doesn't matter, either one is fine. As long as your rounded ends are facing your line, you're good to go. And we want to make sure to move it back about 1/4 of an inch or so, just to make sure that when we're cutting our fringe, that we're not accidentally running into one of the holes here. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and mark. And there's our last mark. Now what we're going to do is I'm going to hand this over the main body piece to Chuck, and he's going to punch that out for us.
Now we could certainly use the revolving punch. The problem is when I need to punch these holes, I just can't get deep enough. So I'm going to jump over to a drive punch. Now this is a number 5, roughly a 3/16, and I'm going to drive punch my holes all the way around. And the last 2 holes. This is set and ready to go. Now I'm going to pass this back to Loni, but we've got to make one more piece to our pattern. Technically 2, our strap billets. But for right now, we need to cut this billet because this needs to go onto our gusset before we assemble the pouch. So we'll get Loni to make that piece of the pattern.
To save a little bit of time, we've gone ahead and cut our billet piece to 1 inch by 5 inches. So at this point, we're going to drop in our marks for our rivets. First one will be at a 1/2 inch, and then again at another inch. And we're going to flip it around and do the same on the other side. 1/2 inch and another inch. This allows a 3-inch spread in the center so that when we pop our D-ring in there and put it over here, it allows plenty of space for our rivets. With that done, we're going to move to our gusset. So to find our center line, we're going to come down to 1 inch, lay that out there, first mark at 1 inch, and then another inch, and the same on the other end. You can see we've left some extra at the end here because the gusset piece does curve around. So we want to make sure that we have enough just in case we need a little bit of extra at the end. Got 1 inch and another inch. Now I'm going to hand these off to Chuck, and he's going to punch the holes.
Nice. Now we could go with revolving punch or drive punch. Drive is handy. So let's go ahead and drop in our holes here for our rivets. And we are going to add a round end onto our billet to give that a nice look. Now I want to do that on my pattern so that alerts me to the fact that I need a round end when I go to my leather. Now that's a nice clean pattern there. Let's go over to our gusset. Drop in our rivet holes there. Very nice. Everything is going to sync up nicely. And other than our 2 straps, let's cut some leather. Now, marking and cutting our leather. First off, like we said, we're going to be using our 5 to 6 ounce pebble grain, which in my opinion is the perfect leather for this project. It's thick, so it's got some weight to it, but at the same time, it's very supple. So our fringe is going to drape and it's going to hang very nicely. Now, while I mark this though, Lonnie's got a couple of great alternatives.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a few different kinds of leather that we have here that I would love to use for this project. The first one on the list would be the deer hide. It is a little bit thinner, it's a little bit stretchier than what we're using today, but with the buttery softness that it has and that gorgeous color, I think that a fringed purse would be perfect with that. The second one would be our suede. We have 21 different colors of suede, so it would be super hard to pick one single color, in which case I think I would just go ahead and pick two, because I think that would make a nice modern looking purse. And then the last on the list, but actually the first on my personal list of leather to use, would be the hair on hide, because it's just so cool and no two are alike, and I think it would just make a super stunning purse.
That would be gorgeous. Now, first off, the hair on is going to be a little bit more of a challenge if you're new to leather, but short of that, that would be spectacular. Now I'm going to take another couple of minutes and mark out our patterned pieces, and then we're going to cut. And our last marks. Now, this is a gel pen. There is just about no perfect answer for marking on black leather, but here's the thing. I don't want to cut on my line because every time I mark a pattern, the panel piece below that's going to be just a hair larger than the actual pattern piece. So we'll have a much more accurate cut here if we cut just inside of our mark lines. And then of course our lace holes, we're just going to punch those out. So I'm going to hand the knife over to Loni, and she's going to cut out our 4 main pieces.
And here's our last piece. I'm going to leave the round ends in because this is all going to get passed over to Chuck. He's going to take care of that and punch the holes in all of our pieces.
But before we go to punching, I notice we only have 1 billet marked on our leather, and we need 2 of these. So I'm just going to take a piece of scrap, draw this in, mark my rivet holes, cut, and then we'll jump over to punching. And we've got a bunch of holes to punch here, a bunch of lace holes, but let's start with our 2 billets. Now we're marked for a 1-inch round end, so let's drop that in. Good, very clean punches. Now, we're using an 11/64 here. This is for our lace. But as long as you're in the 3/16 inch area, the lace will fit nicely. Now let's drop in our rivet holes. Nice. Now, like I said, got a bunch of holes to punch here, but we're going to punch these holes, then we're going to pass this big piece over to Loni, and we're going to cut some fringe. And our last 2 holes. Now that's a lot of holes, 3 pieces for lace, but again, like always, if we take our time here, we will be thrilled with the outcome. Now I'm going to take my main body piece, because we're going to have fringe on both ends of this, so I'm going to take this piece, pass it back to Loni, and she's going to cut our fringe.
As you can see, I've laid in a piece of painter's tape here, and this is just a handy tool to give us a nice clean edge to work with. It doesn't leave any residue on the leather, so we don't have to worry about that, but it does just make things just a little bit easier. One thing to note when cutting fringe, it's fairly easy, but we do need to make sure that to make things not slip, that we put some non-slip tape on the back of our straight edge, and that we always start with a nice clean sharp blade. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to line up the bottom of my straight edge with the bottom of my tape and push it over to about 3/16, which is right between 1/4 and 1/8 of an inch. And then just take a glance right down the line here to make sure that the width is the same all the way down. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut. And there's our last cut. So I just want to note that before I made my last cut, I took an extra piece of leather and just butted it up against my last piece of fringe just to make sure that my straight edge doesn't tip when I cut and give me an angular cut there. So okay, I've cut both ends and I took my time, but it was well worth it because the fringe looks nice and clean and consistent. So for this project, we're keeping it simple and straight on the end, but I just want to remind you that you can change it up and just have fun with it. You could, before you cut your fringe, because it makes it look cleaner, cut an angle at one end, and maybe the opposite end you could do a different angle. Or another idea would be to bring it down to a point and on the opposite end do an inverted point so that when you close your purse, you have a diamond shape. Those are just a couple of ideas, just have fun with it. So we are almost ready to assemble here, but we have one more step, and Chuck is going to take it from here.
Now, just about the last step, and then we're going to assemble the pouch part of our project. I'm going to add my billets to my gusset. So I'm going to use a 3/16 inch double cap rivet because I'm going through 3 weights or 3 thicknesses of leather. Now, let's be cautious here because sometimes your natural tendency is to drop your D-ring in facing your project. But since this is going to curl around and this is going to be the outside of the project, we're going to drop that in D away from our lace holes. Now let's take a couple of caps, sink that in, and that's almost a perfect fit there. You can see I've got just about an eighth, maybe a little bit less on that rivet as it sticks above my leather. That's going to give me a good clean set. Now let's flip this around, and the other end, same thing. Drop this in, and again, let's don't forget our D, which I have done so many times. Drop that in, nice. Let's drop in caps. And take our setter. And 2 good clean shots, and we have our rivets set, ready to go. Now, let's jump over. We need to cut a little bit of lace to lace our pouch together. And at that point, let's put this together.
So we have several options that we can do with our project. We could actually use pre-cut lace that we have here at Weaver, and we have lots of different ones to choose from. Or we could go ahead and do like what we're going to do today and cut our own lacing. So we'll be cutting our lacing at 1/8 of an inch by about 38 inches long today. And typically you would cut your lacing about 3 times the length of the piece that you're lacing. But because we have such a long piece, we're going to go ahead and go with about half that length. And what we'll do is we'll start our lacing at the top here and bring it around to the center of the bottom and let the remainder hang down with the rest of our fringe. That'll just add to that rustic look. So I'll go ahead and cut my lace here. Okay, nice, clean, consistent cut. And again, taking my time, we get a nice, clean, smooth edge. So you can see I've clipped the ends of my others. I'm going to do that now. It just simply makes it so much easier when we're lacing our project. Okay, and now we're going to lace this amazing, gorgeous purse together.
Now let's take our gusset. We're going to lace the gusset onto the front part of the pouch first. That's going to be our easiest lacing. But we've got a little trick here where we're going to be able to secure our lace in. So I'm going to come from the front of the pouch and I'm going to go through the gusset secondly. Now let's bring that down, bring that lace right to the end. I'm just going to leave, I don't know, about 3 or 4 inches, because what I'm going to do is lay this down, and we're simply going to lace around that as we move down the pouch. In my second hole, right through, very nice. The holes are lining up nicely. Now for my first piece, let's bring this around, get that a little bit snug, drop that in, and then this will simply sit right there. Now as I lace, that will get tucked in there relatively nicely. And we can tug that a bit, get that good and secure. Now let's simply lace down to our midpoint. Keeping our top grain out. Nice, and that's going to secure that down in there very easily. And from here, I'm going to lace down to the center, let the remaining piece of lace hang down, And I'm going to start over on the other side and work my way down because my holes we counted. So we know this is going to match up perfectly. So I'll bring that down and we'll have the front part of our pouch. Nice, and that last piece. So I could certainly tie a knot, tie a square knot, tuck it right under there and we wouldn't see it. But I tend to like to leave that loose. Now that's more than secure. It's going to stay there for years and years. But that just kind of gives us, again, that rustic look. Now let's jump over to our main body because we have to do something a little bit different here when we're lacing. Because I can come around with the whip stitch, which is the same thing we've been doing. But the problem is when I get down to this point, I won't be able to do that. So I'm going to have to work with a buck stitch across here. Now that sounds complicated. It's not. All a buck stitch is I'm going to come out of this hole, into that hole, out of that hole, and into that. And it will be a perfect pouch. So let's start on this side, just like we did on our gusset and front part of the pouch. I'm going to come from the back side, top grain out, work in through the gusset, and I'm going to leave just a little bit of tail on that lace, keeping my top grain out. And I'm simply going to lace this until I get down to that part where my holes start to spread out across the pouch. I'm going to lace this just like we did on the other side, clean and easy. Now we've got that laced, very nice. So you can see how the buck stitch works. Very easy, looks good. Now again, I could always tie a knot on this because that's the back of our pouch and we would never see that, but I'm going to let that hang open. And look at that, isn't that clean and beautiful? Look how very square. Now we left a little extra here, so all I have to do is take a pair of scissors. I'm going to cut that across flush with the throat of the pouch. Look how clean and beautiful that is. Great pouch. Now, next step, and we're almost there. Next step, let's go ahead and drop in a closure. And let's punch an oblong. To save us a little time, what I've done is I've measured from left to right, so my oblong is centered, and I've dropped my pouch, my flap over the throat of the pouch, and I've measured from top to bottom to center it there, because on the pouch face, I've got plenty of room. So now that we've got that set and ready to go, I'm going to step over here. I'm going to grab a drive punch and my concho. We're going to lay that in here and our closure will be complete. Now we've got our concho, beautiful concho. That's going to be a nice touch. Now what I need to do, let's straighten this out. Let's bring our flap down because I'm going to mark that on the face of the pouch itself so I know exactly where my concho needs to go. So I've got a mark there. Now let's take our board. I'm going to slide that in right there. I'm going to take my drive punch and on the board, simply going to make a punch hole. Now let's bring that back over here. With our concho, what we need is we need this to stand up above the leather just a little bit so we can make a little donut or washer. Now you can punch that with a round end punch, or you simply can take a punch and a piece of scrap, drop that in, and just with a knife or scissors, I can cut around that. That's more than enough. So what we're going to do is we're going to put that on the concho. We're going to drop the concho onto the face through our punch hole. Now we're going to add just a little dab of glue to our screw. Nice. And now let's simply screw that in with the donut or the washer between the front of the concho and the face of the leather. I'm going to screw that down in there. Nice. So that actually sits above our leather just a little bit. And that is perfect. So I'm going to bring that over, run that through, and we have a button. Now it's going to take a little bit for this to kind of work in. That's a 1-inch hole and a 1-inch concho because I don't want that too much larger, but one will be just right, gives me room to work that in. Doesn't that look great? This is just coming along nicely. So let's go ahead. Last step, we're going to drop in our shoulder strap.
So to save a little bit of time, I've already cut my first strap. That'll be our tongue strap, which will be 33 inches long. My second strap I've marked for here. They're both 1 inch wide. That second strap will be 18 inches long. Now, this is your project, so by all means, cut these straps at any length that's comfortable to you. For our purposes, 33 inches is pretty average, so that's what we're going to go with here. And now we're ready to cut for length. To save just a little bit of time, I've gone ahead and cut the buckle end to 18 inches. Then I can cut my second piece for my tongue end to the 33 inches that we need. Because both of these ends are going to be passing through D-rings, I'm going to go ahead and use my pattern for my billet piece to mark the holes on here because they're going to match up just perfectly. Go ahead and drop those in. And then because the end over here is going to be passing through a buckle, I can use the exact same piece. Again, the holes will match up perfectly. That comes in really handy. So now our buckle piece is finished and ready for chuck. Now I'll go ahead and measure the 33 inches. And then we're going to go down 3 inches before we start at intervals of 1 inch for our 5 holes. The reason for the 3 inches at the end is because if you're using the very last hole, there's still sufficient leather at the end to pass through your buckle. And we're good to go, and I will hand these over to Chuck.
All right, so let's start with our buckle side. So I'm going to drop in our 4 holes on each end, just using our revolving punch. And flip that around. One end is going to go through a D-ring, and one end is going to go through a buckle. So one side we're going to use an oblong, 1 inch oblong for a 1 inch buckle. So let's go ahead and drop that in. Easy enough. Now, this is not a necessity, but it is certainly a nice touch. I'm going to use a round end punch. Now, the strap at both ends is going to be on the back side, and we won't really see this, but it sure is going to add a nice touch. Very professional look. Now let's jump over to our tongue side. First off, let's cut with a revolving punch. Punch our holes, size holes. And a little extra pattern material there, but we can cut that off. Or we can clean that off. Now let's jump to that other end, because this will go through our D-ring. So no oblong required here, but we are going to add our round end punch to the back of that. So again, a nice detail. And let's flip that around. Now, Loni is marked for us right there, so let's drop in our English point. There we go, very nice. So we are set to knock this onto our pouch, and that is our last step in our project. Now we've got our work surface cleaned up. We've gone from punching to setting rivets. So we're going to use a center bar buckle, no keeper required. I'm simply going to slide that on to my buckle strap. Let that tine slip through the oblong, just like that. Perfect. Now what I tend to do is I want to let the buckle hang over the edge of my quartz, so that gives that loop that actually goes around the bar room to go around the bar, and I in turn can simply set my rivets on a flat surface. Now we're using small rivets here. These are 1/4 inch double cap rivets. 2 good pops, and that is set nicely. Nice looking billet. Now, we're going to set this pouch up to be worn on the right side. I want my buckle up front. So I'm going to take my billet and I'm going to run through this side and bring that around so my top grain is outside. So let's just put our pouch on the edge of the table. I'm going to load 2 rivet posts in. Very good. Let's drop that down. Bring that over to our edge. Drop that into our rivets. Very nice. Everything is fitting very clean. We measured our patterns and they are working for us. Looks good thus far. All right, let's flip this over. Now we're going to drop in our tongue side. Same thing, I need my top grain out. I'm going to run that through my D. I'm going to load my rivet post from the back side. Drop that down on my marble. And again, our holes are fitting nicely. We took our time with our pattern, and that's the outcome. Drop in caps, and I love the double caps. You can actually hear them snap down. It's a great rivet. 2 good pops. That is set. Great project. Well, Lonnie, how did that come out?
This is gorgeous. It looks just like the one that I have, and just like mine, I know it's going to probably outlive me. I just love it.
Good. Well, a lot of fun. Again, maybe a little bit tedious here and there, but if we take our time, we are going to enjoy this purse for decades to come. I hope it's been a lot of fun. I hope your purse is just as beautiful. Good luck with your projects.